Welcome back to the show. Glad you're still with us. It is Wellness Wednesday, and on this second part of the conversation, we want to really look at what is happening, especially when it comes to our teenagers, our learners in schools. And we're looking at It Takes a Village, understanding teenage brain development, mental health, as well as school safety. And I'm saying this because based on what we have experienced recently, unfortunately, we have girls who lost their lives to a recent school fire. And this is not a new quote unquote tragedy. It's been happening. And the biggest question is, aren't we listening to our teenagers? Are they communicating something that we're completely ignoring? Are the parents to blame, as far as what is happening with our teenagers? Are the teachers also doing enough? So it's a holistic conversation that we're about to have, just to really understand the teenage brain, the development, and the milestone as well. Mental health, which is quite important in this day and age, but also look at school safety. And I am not alone. I am joined by, I'm just going to start on my immediate, what is this left? Yes, I'm going to start on my immediate left. And we have Dr. Washeke Nganga, who is a parent to adolescents. Important to really have you on the show, Dr. Washeke, to just understand how are they doing, because so many parents are like, this children, yeah? Like, take them somewhere else, not here. So we'd really hear from you. And then next to Dr. Washeke, we have Otoa Sifuna, who is an education expert, joining us on the conversation. Good to have you, Otoa. A lot has been happening in schools, and I know from your perspective, you're like, nyinyi mumeachilia watoto sana as parents, but would also want to hear, is that true? Or are there things that both the parents and the teachers can, do to support their learners? And we also have Dr. Njeri Karianjahi, who is an adolescent medicine expert. Good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us as well. And this conversation comes from an article that you actually wrote, and this is on LinkedIn. Just talking about the brain development as far as our teenagers are concerned, trying to understand them, but also understand some of the things that makes them make decisions, and the whole lot. So can we just first of all start from there? What is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're noticing, especially when it comes to the brain development of our teenagers?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Winnie. In terms of writing that article, one of the things that we needed to do as clinicians is take a step back and really just reflect on what are the things that influence brain development. So for a lot of young people, we talk about brain development going on all the way into the 30s. The latest research is actually saying brain development ends at 30. So before, we used to be told that it's about 24, 25 years. We're having a lot of formation happening at that point. When we think about how the brain development is happening, it tends to happen from what we call back to front. So at the back is where the emotional part of the brain is. So those connections tend to happen a lot earlier than the part of the brain that does all the rational, thinking, a lot of the decision making. So if you have a mix like the unfortunate incident that we had, it can be a very emotionally charged environment and space. It's unfortunate that we don't have all the details as to what led up. We've had different things, but all of them point towards that emotional overload for those young people, to the point where you're not able to make rational decisions. Usually in our day-to-day clinical care, if we find an emotionally charged young person, first we want to be able to cool things down, and then be able to explain to them, like, if there's a procedure or there are certain things that need to get done. But when they're emotionally charged, it ends up being extremely difficult for them to be able to understand fully and be able to make some rational decisions. And so when we think about that in terms of development, and then think about something as tragic as a fire, and a fire represents, like all other tragic things that have happened in the school setting. The research is showing us that when you experience something as tragic as that, what we're calling the adverse childhood event, it can impact how your body and your brain especially continues to grow and develop. So my question was, is there hope to be able to change that trajectory? And I really wanted for us to take a step back as clinicians, as parents, as teachers, to really think about, okay, this thing has happened. How do we then positively influence brain development so that we can get these young people back on track. Because we've seen a ripple effect after Utumishi. So I wanted to be able to start having that conversation with parents, because a lot of them were starting to ask, what can we do? Now that this thing has happened and we're having this ripple effect, what can I do as a parent? So being able to start that conversation about what are the intentional things we can do to change the trajectory after this adverse event that has happened requires a lot of intentionality, but also a lot of guidance as well.
And empathy as well, because I've seen, especially with the debates going on social media, where there's some parent, someone I think asked, would you rather be the parent who has lost a child, or would you rather be the parent whose child survived but they started the fire? And it's sort of like a catch-22, like, neither is fire. But also from what you've talked about, there's sort of the expected. They're teenagers. It's okay for them to make all the mistakes. It's okay for them to not, quote unquote, think straight. But really, where does the expected, reach? Where is that boundary where we say, no, this is not expected. This is something that really needs to be looked at. So we'll come to you then to really understand the whole brain development and what's normal, what's not. But Ochoa, again, from a teacher's standpoint, from an education, expert standpoint, given what has happened recently, and even just the things that we have seen over time as far as the schools are concerned, do you feel there's a deeper issue that is not being addressed? And from all quarters, from the parents' side, from the teachers' side, from the education system, in itself, do you feel there's a deeper issue that is not being addressed? And if so, what are some of the things that you're seeing?
Thank you so much, Winnie, also bringing me on board to engage in this crucial discussion. It is quite sad that as a society we come up with knee-jerk reactions because we should be much better right now after a series of almost these events happened in the past. But to me, as Otoa Sifuna, who has handled these teenagers in school, on a day-to-day, I observe them, and it's good that the clinician brings this dimension. For me, I look at, first of all, our curriculum that we are teaching these young ones. The curriculum sometimes, and I think the rain starts beating us when also the parents really come in and drum a lot of support. I want my child to do hard stuff, chemistry, mathematics, STEM.
We're a family of geniuses.
Yeah, we are a family of geniuses. And so these guys grow up, first of all, with pressure that they must achieve and uphold their family legacy. But that is not even much more crucial. The thing that I've been thinking about as a teacher is look at the human anatomy. We have the head, we have the heart, and we have the hands. Most of our curricula, whether local or international, have only dwelled on teaching matters cognition and the use of hands. We have never, Winnie, at any given moment, wondered, is there any values? The heart, which is like the engine that really now sends signals to almost everywhere, matters empathy, the values. The other day, I was talking to somebody, and it was also a heated debate, that maybe it was much better when we were domiciled in the African setting, society, and culture. Right now, Winnie, we have consumed a lot of things that are so exotic. We do not know how to control them. It's like we are on autopilot. We don't know how to navigate which bearing. And so the young ones have realized that there is a laguna somewhere. Okay. And so they are also experimenting on these things. Even in matters technology, there is that phrase, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah? Yeah. The psychologists will tell you there is a whole spectrum of tabula rasa. The child is born as an empty debe, but over a period of time, he or she gathers all the things that are happening. For us as teachers, we are told very clearly that you teach somebody and chances of forgetting are very high. But if this child learns by observation, that thing remains forever. You did ask on your introduction, is there a missing link somewhere? The missing link, as I start this conversation, I believe as society, we have failed the young ones.
All right, the society as a whole. Okay, and we look at, there's a time I pointed out, the society dictates this, and someone asked me, but see, you're in the society, so you are the society as well. So we look at the society and what really that looks like. But also really focusing on what you're saying, the heart, empathy, soft skills, emotional intelligence as well, which is important. But Dr. Osheke, so you are a parent to teenagers. First of all, how are you?
Well, we are a worried lot as parents of teenagers because, one, we don't fully understand that teenage period. Much as we passed through it ourselves, it's like nothing like what we went through. So there's a bit of worry around that. But we are also encouraged that, we went through it, so they too will go through it. And there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. Okay. But I think, parents, there are very few parents who set out to deliberately harm their children, whether intentionally or not. There are very few who set out to harm their children. So even if parents may or may not do the right thing, it's usually not from a bad space. It's from a space of not knowing, maybe not being informed, or maybe having to choose one thing or another, and they chose a different thought. Maybe they're torn between spending time with the child and going out to either fend for the child, and so they chose one or the other. But so usually the intentions are good, but sometimes, not.
I see. And I'll also want to hear from you, because you're raising them, you actually experience them. And there's that thing where we say, even as we were teenagers at some point, and we expect you to behave because as we behaved, forgetting that we're different generations and how we were raised and how we were brought up is different from what is happening now. So what is it that you're noticing from your own children, but also just the ones around you and even their interactions? What is it that you're noticing as a parent that sort of worries you, but at the same time you're like, okay, this is an opportunity for me as a parent to teach them, to guide them, and to offer them comfort or support where they need?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the village that's raising the child, our children's village is wider than what our village was. So our village was maybe your schoolmates. If I think of a child, your schoolmates, your neighbors, your family. Largely that was the village that was raising them. Right now, they're being raised on TikTok and Instagram, and, all those people form the village, unfortunately. Yeah. And so wherever they get their information, it's wider. And that's a worry. It's terrifying. Yeah, that's a worry. Because you want to be the louder voice, but you're now competing against some very loud voices. Yeah.
I see that. And we'll come to you then, Dr. Njeri, to understand, so this wider society, the impact that it has, and even not just at this point of teenagehood, but also just in future, because at some point they'll become parents, as well. So what impact is that? But just to remind you on the question that we're asking you this morning on this very important conversation, and that is, when you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, and supported? I really like this question because it takes us back a little bit of introspection. Just think about when you were a teenager, okay? What helped you feel safe, seen, or supported? How you can reach us is through our WhatsApp number, which is on your screens, or make use of our digital platforms, and that is at NTV Kenya across all board, and tag me as well at Lubembe_Winnie, and that is on X. But really, let us know, when you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, or supported? So Dr. Njeri, to come to you as well, it takes a village. The village is becoming wider.
Yeah.
Can we just put a little bit of focus on the village called internet and the digital spaces and what it's doing to our teenagers, and especially when it comes to where they are at in terms of their brain development, and now you put in this village called the internet.
The internet.
Yes.
So it's really interesting that Dr. Osheke was talking about this wider village that sort of expanded for our children and adolescents and has expanded for us as adults. But the thing that we're starting to see more and more is that it doesn't connect us more. It has siloed us more, to the point where you find that by the time parents and teachers are sitting together, it's mostly about academics, like the way Mwalimu said, like that's the bigger focus. Or now when the doctor now sits and talks to the teacher, it's a lot to do with feeling academics. And that's why now we are having the conversation about the young person. And so when you think about, and I really liked your example in terms of the head, the heart, the hands, the heart is sort of left in this limbo, while there's this huge village, but then really everyone is in their silos about how we should be able to impact this young person, and we're not talking to each other. And I think that why I was saying it takes a village is because we do need to start talking to each other. And when you think about the way the internet is structured, it's structured so that people are able to access each other more. But what it has done is divide people more based on opinions, based on the things that you or I are interested in. And what we've started seeing, especially with young people, a lot of the research is actually telling us, because they see the lives of other people, it really brings about a lot of dissatisfaction, which then drives anxiety and drives depression. We've seen, in addition to that, they are being influenced by certain things where now it sort of erodes. You talked about traditional and our cultural values. There's a new value system that has eroded into homes that has come from the internet. And so again, that ends up being that open door that I don't think everybody is actively aware of. And then, so we've talked about the anxiety, we've talked about depression, we've talked about a shift in terms of the value system that has happened, but also even in terms of just being able to do proper communication, being able to do problem solving. If all I do is complain from behind a keyboard, but then I haven't learned how to talk to Mwalimu, I haven't learned how to approach him, even if he might be scary. Okay, I don't know, but today, even if he's scary, just learning how to be able to sort of bridge that and learn how to speak and be able to advocate for yourself. A lot of the social interactions that young people are experiencing in their teen years are meant to be spaces where you learn how to be uncomfortable in that first time conversation. You learn how to problem solve when you're not getting along with somebody, or you're in a team with someone and you're not quite seeing eye to eye, but we have a common goal. So when you remove those and replace them with the internet has a new set of rules. And those rules keep changing. You think you know one thing, then there's a new platform. Then the platform morphs. So when we think about it as a village, we, the adult village, need to start talking to each other. We need to educate ourselves more about the internet, so that then now when we think about how to be able to influence young people, we're still being able to support those social things that help in terms of proper development and getting them back on track.
I see. Yeah. And even there's another thing where they're actually observing us as adults and looking at what we're doing versus what we're telling them either to do or not to do. And someone was making a joke and say, this generation, this is not the generation of no. You tell them no and you tell them why you're telling them no. And if your no does not make sense,
like
make it
make sense.
Yeah.
And a lot
make
of
it
the
make
times,
sense.
And a lot of times the thing I'm usually telling parents is, don't look at it as defiance.
Okay.
Look at it as an open door for communication. It's not. It's expected for them to ask why. Okay. That's a very developmentally appropriate thing to be doing. So instead of looking at it as, why are you defying me? Because I said. And I'm usually telling a lot of parents, it's no longer the time of because I said. So it's learning how to then bridge that and have a conversation. Okay. By the way, it doesn't mean that we excuse bad behavior and people being rude, but it's also teaching them what it means to advocate for yourself, to be able to speak and to have a debate without being inappropriate, without being rude, with still being respectful to the people that you're talking to.
I see. Yeah. It's important. And I know there's a question on what's normal, what's not, and especially when it comes to the reaction. So I'll still come to you, but I also want to hear from you, Ottawa, from a teacher's standpoint, from an education standpoint, what is expected, what it's not. Because again, in school, this is a group of teenagers, more or less within the same age. So it's like whatever decision they're making, it makes sense to them at that point because they're sort of right on the same level. But really, what's expected, what's not, and what should teachers then be very keen to look at and say, no, this is not good, and it will influence, the rest of the school or the classmates.
Yeah, as teachers, we continue to grapple with first of all, the question of peer pressure.
Okay.
You know, if you really corner these individuals on either one of them,
Okay.
you'll have a very sober discussion with them. But now the problem is when they are acting on mass psychology. And I know most of them, they come to regret almost immediately after making such a grievous mistake that I ought not to have, taken that.
Yeah.
And for us as teachers, yes, we want to accept that there is a communication gap. One that has been occasioned to us by the age difference that has existed. These guys are now communicating in a language that is not ours. They are communicating in coded language sometimes. You can be in a room with these guys and you totally do not pick what they're actually saying. Yes, yeah. And the clinician here has spoken very, very clearly. What is it that our young people want? For me, I did say that society, when, you know, for me as a teacher, I know that the school ecosystem operates on 3 dimensions. We have the school itself, the home, and the community. Okay. So if we have got a synergy that now encompasses all this, I will first of all start with the community. We have felt as teachers that there is a strong disappointment from even the political class in our country. I did say initially that teach me and I forget. Show me and it remains ingrained in my memory. What is the behavior? What is the role modeling? Because modeling is part of behavior control. If these young guys, and you know, when they close sometimes over the summer, they are spending a lot of time and they are not detached from the community or the society that you are in. They are seeing all forms of shenanigans from the political class. Right now, we are talking of the era of goonism. Goons are all over. Are we pretending that these young guys are just zombies that cannot internalize things? So when they also come to school and they have spent a whole long second term and they are growing fatigue, and you come in and say, young guys, on Monday we have a cat, chemistry double. And they're like, no, I'm not fully prepared out of this. What is the way out? I also want to really say that the parents, yes, it's good you have brought us your children. And when your kids come, they are placed under our custody. Most of us are also parents, so we compare your kids to our own kids. But for us teachers, it has reached at a point where we must now look at these things critically. What is the role of a parent in the education sector right now? Have we relegated the question of parentage to teachers? When I went to the university, I was only taught how to transform an ignorant child to a more knowledgeable person through cognitive empowerment. I do not have skills on how to maybe parent or reform, yeah? We do not have a police station or a military command in schools. Yet, and it's so sad because we spend, out of the whole duration of a year, we spend 3/4 of that period is spent in school. The children spend only 1/4 of that period at home. But immediately they arrive at home, they're taken to what? They're called tuition centers. So the parents themselves, they do not want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
So for me as a teacher, I think partly or largely the parent has relegated the duty. They are not spending. The other day I was having a sit down with a parent whose child had actually, you know, they don't want us to call a spade and say they are truant boys, they are exercising juvenile delinquent. You know, right now, Winnie, also our Employer Teacher Service Commission has made the teacher more vulnerable. It's like we are powerless.
Okay, I see.
If this child has put you to the wall and you know an infraction has been committed, as a teacher, You remember those days? I remember my high school principal used to call him the Jeshi, the platoon commander. You see him without even talking and you are fidgeting. These guys cannot run.
No.
They pass by the teacher.
Okay.
They say familiarity breeds content.
Yes.
These guys are so familiar with their teachers. I don't know whether now with the changes and also natural attrition, we are now a blend of young teachers as well as
more experienced
even
teachers.
during our time.
Yeah.
You're hugging with a teacher. But now, you are being forced. Please, create the rapport with these young ones. Hug them.
But let there be a bit of a boundary.
So, where are our children coming from? Where are these teenagers coming from? They're coming from broken families. They're coming from, and I understand, sometimes, it's not just about teaching. It's also this child maybe has seen it all from home. So as a teacher, you also want to create that space for the sense of belonging.
I see.
But they're taking it too far.
I see that. So then when we come back from the break, we'll interrogate that in terms of, yes, still maintain mutual respect, but at the same time, understand there's a bit of a boundary. At the end of the day, I am your teacher. Nowadays, they're not called teachers. They're called facilitators. Yeah. Hey, all this change in whatnot. But also, Dr. Osheke would come to you to understand, because Ottawa has said parents have relegated their duties. They've left everything to the teachers. So from a parent standpoint, what is it that you feel why aren't parents then able to take their role, as parents? What exactly is happening in families, right? Let's explore that after the break. But just to remind you a question that we're asking you this morning, and the question is, when you were a teenager, what helped you to feel safe, to feel seen, and to feel supported? We'll come back and go through your feedback, so do stay with us. The show is Your World. See you after the break. Welcome back to the show. The conversation continues even during the break, and we're literally looking at it takes a village, okay? And we've said from the first part of the conversation is the village that we used to know growing up, it's no longer the same village. If anything, the village has gotten wider. So what exactly is happening to our teenagers when it comes to their brain development, when it comes to even the schools and what is happening in the schools, and even from the home setup, the parents as well? What exactly is happening that we're experiencing what we are experiencing now in terms of arson, for example, murder, for example, or indiscipline in general amongst our teenagers? So that is what we're focusing today on the show. And we're asking you, when you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, and supported? When you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, and supported? That is what we're asking you at NTV Kenya across all board on our digital platforms, is how you can reach us or make use of our WhatsApp number and let us know. But again, if you have a question, feel free to also engage with us, right here on Your World. So before we went on a break, Dr. Osheke, from a parent standpoint, you parents, you're relegating, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So the question would be, number one, do parents know that they are relegating their duties? And if so, what is it? What is driving that? I do not want to say ignorance, but sort of like letting loose and just let the teachers do their job. They'll take care of these learners. Yeah.
All right. I think, so parents, I feel, have relegated some parts of their role. We are still very keen on grades. And so at the end of the term, we want to sit down and look at the child's report form and understand, what did they get and why did they get what they got. Mm-hmm. But certain things like the soft skills, is your child being kind? Is your child being forgiving? Mm-hmm. Are they developing into a good human being? Mm-hmm. That is not really the focus so much. And I was actually thinking as you were talking, do we model conflict resolution in our homes? When you disagree, say, between the partners, usually you close the bedroom door and have the fight in the bedroom. You don't want the kids to see the fight, but maybe we should be showing them how do you disagree in a manner that is okay. They don't know how to disagree we've not modeled that for them, and so in that aspect maybe we are failing. But then that said, parenthood doesn't come with a manual. And so and you can even parent one child in the same way, another one, and they turn out very different. So what works for one does not always work for the other. And so that is still it's tricky. And part of us, we are borrowing from what we saw growing up. So how are we parented ourselves, And it was straightforward, our parents did not have that time for, negotiating. No. So that's the what do you call it? The hardware that we have as parents. That's what we are borrowing from. And I guess we also need to do some unlearning, because we are dealing with a very different generation.
I see that. And there's also a lot of conversation around, still on the parenting, but on the how. And a lot of people would compare to how we were. You did not even have time to think about not responding, but talking back, because they would have slapped you before even that thought. And now we're seeing a lot of people who say, but I do not want to parent my child the way I was parented, right? So we're doing completely the opposite, but at the same time exposing them to a lot of things, because if they go out to the outside world, the world wouldn't care your mom was like, let me not raise my child this way. So that aspect of change in terms of parenting, do you feel that yes, still exposes the teenagers to behaving the way they are behaving, and that in turn brings about a lot of problems in the different areas that they get to interact with the others?
And I think I'd go back to a point that Mwalimu talked about, we are kind of caught between cultures. So there's this culture that was very strict and it was clear what the rules were. And then we are now borrowing from a culture that is so laissez-faire that anything goes. And as a result, they've also lost the society because of that anything goes. So we are here trying to balance between the two. Trying to balance between the two, and sometimes that gets messed up. And I think also there's the aspect of trust. You've asked the question, what made you feel trusted? And if, say, this child cannot trust the teacher, they feel maybe the teacher's intentions are not for their good, and maybe they can't trust the parent either. They don't feel the parent is looking out for them. Then they feel, I have to just kind of look out for myself. So I think what made us feel comfortable was that society, the teachers, we felt the teachers were really out to make the best out of us, and that the home was supportive. So maybe that's part of what is lost. They're not feeling that.
So the question that we're asking today is, what, as a teenager, what made you feel safe, seen, and supported? So we have a comment here. This one says, what made me feel seen was my mother hanging out with me, her learning what I hate eating and what I love eating, and also being told, I love you. And also continues to say, what made me feel seen was being taken out to restaurants or going for fun activities, then talking about different things and being asked, how am I doing in general? I really, really like that. And also they say, also the fact that they kept their word whenever they said they would do something. Are we seeing a complete opposite of what is happening now?
So here's the thing, and I keep saying this. I think parents are getting a really bad rap, and they're trying really hard.
They are, yes.
And I say that because, like Washeke said, there is no rule book. There is no more Kenya. And they're having to learn things almost afresh. And again, the more cultural supports that people had before. When you think about rural-urban migration, in the rural setting, a lot of the children would be raised together. It wouldn't just be your parents, it would be aunts, uncles, their older cousins, older siblings. But now when you find guys moving, especially to try and make a better life for yourself, for your family, you find that there's a lot of isolation. This parent has had to look for maybe have a nanny, or they're not even able to afford that, and they're having to do what the community was doing is now being done by one person. So that pressure is a lot. So I'm always just trying to see how we can be able to meet them where they are. Again, not all parents are actively aware because they're trying to provide, they're trying to balance the social and economic pressures that are there. So being able to sort of like bring them back, do a bit of coaching around what are some of the things in terms of parenting gaps that we're seeing, and just trying to see what are the tools tools can we give you to be able to give the best in terms of this young person? I usually even ask parents in school, apart from grades, please ask Mwalimu about how your young person interacts with other young people. How are they doing, like in terms of, are they in a sport? Are they in a particular club? And how are they doing in that club or sport? What else can I do to be able to support what you're doing in terms of caring for my child or caring for my teen? So, and that's why I keep coming back to this village concept, where now we really need to lean on each other, because we're constantly learning things. I've realized you can have been a parent for 50 years. And then the child who's born today, that 50-year experience, it doesn't fly.
Yeah.
So then what happens to this parent? Because now we're seeing grandparents having to parent. And then coming back to the thing of there's a different way that grandparents parented. And then they have this young person who is talking back to them, whereas before, this was not the order of the day. So being able to support with that and being able to coach them around some of those elements and doing it together as a team, so that you also don't feel, the parent doesn't feel like you're attacking them or you're all ganging up against them, because they are getting overwhelmed in terms of how wrong they are, what else they've done that's a mistake. So just rethinking that in terms of how do we then partner with you to get you to where we need you to be to help this young person be the best they can be.
I see. And speaking about the village, we also have another comment. This one says, as a millennial who grew up in the village, the entire village was responsible for my upbringing, and I could be disciplined by a stranger when wrong. That's true. We were tandikwad by anyone and everyone. And then they continue to say, this collective responsibility in upbringing equally contributed to aligning me to proper values, contrary to what we see today. This was a safe, seen, and protected space. Today, you cannot touch someone's child, and the upbringing space has completely changed to technology. Parents now buying TVs, phones, PlayStations for their children to make up for their absence. Of course, hard economic times have contributed to this, because parents have to put food on their tables, but there is need to strike a balance. And I think that is what we've really emphasized, that fine, we're not saying you as a parent, you failed completely, but also find balance. Yes, protect, provide, and do all those things, but also guide, support, and encourage, which requires a lot of intentionality and presence as well from the parents. Before I go to the next comment, Ottawa, I know you've touched a little bit on the parents, but also can we talk about the teachers? And yes, you've said there's also there's so many gaps as far as the teachers being supported to be the best, teachers to these learners, to be the best facilitators to these learners. But can we just talk about the teachers themselves as an individual? Do you feel there's some aspects of the individual who's a teacher that has failed the learner in a way of either supporting them, offering them the best guidance that they can give, so that they grow up as a holistic, responsible young person?
Yeah, and Winnie, from the very onset, I said the panacea to this problem is not
one person.
Yeah, it's a
collective
approach. And you cannot say, the teachers have become detached there. There is now trending in most schools, teach and go home. Teach and go home is a phrase that is in most teaching environment, because again, what has society done to the teacher? My two panelists have indicated it so well. The place that was held by a teacher in those yesteryears, where has that glory gone to? Because I remember everybody knew that home belongs to a teacher. The teacher was like the epitome of that candle that lit in the entire society. But right now, do you know, the other day I was having a conversation with teenagers about career choices. And out of a class of almost 50, I asked, how many of you want to be teachers? When Ms. Otoa has exited the stage, none whatsoever. I asked them why, because they are the Y generations. Why isn't there anybody coming up to replace a teacher? Do you know the responses I got is so dehumanizing? One of them said, they are so poor. Yeah? And maybe And that also goes to the role of the government. Do you know in other jurisdictions, Winnie, teachers are highly paid. They are highly paid. But if we have to really come to the bottom of this matter, are teachers well remunerated in this country? They might not be. And part of the issues, I'm not saying that teachers become detached because they are frustrated, but the challenges bedeviling the teaching profession is also becoming so expounded, such that whether we are talking of mental issues among the teenagers, we should also be talking about mental issues among the teachers. Most teachers are so stressed up, and nobody is talking about matters welfare of the teachers. The government the other day were just, when you take teachers as guinea pigs, they do not have a very robust medical scheme, for example. Teachers are dying every day out of very silly conditions that can be treatable. So when we empower our teachers and make them also valued, that teacher will look to the following day to come and support the children. But I think, to me, we have really just taken the teaching profession as any other profession. Number two, what is the responsibility of the teenagers themselves? Yes, they have the needs, they have the desires. They are growing. Most of them are in the adolescent and that puberty stages. But also, all this comes with responsibility. You cannot tell me that a school that is maybe an extra county school, some of their demands are too big, Winnie, that we should be eating maybe burgers, hot dogs, and all that. So can also them as young people of this country, because they today they are teenagers, tomorrow they are not. There will be parents with children also putting pressure on them. Some of their demands are just out of question. So even as they grow up, because I lead a leadership team in my school, and I keep on telling them that leadership has to begin at the very young stage. Are they growing up into responsible leaders? Then when we talk about the internet, there is digital citizenship. Maybe if there's one thing that I really liked about the CBC that is coming up, it is the component of integrating digital citizenship within the spaces that these guys are navigating. You cannot just, and I did say that when you consume something that is not yours from the very cultural orientation, you do not have the limits on how you're going to go about it, because that is a free space. It has no cultural orientation. For us who think that part of the problem, the solution lies with going back to our traditional roots, you might not get that on the internet. So these guys are really looking a lot. The influencers are not our influencers. And so most of the mistakes they are making is because it is not within their domain. So as they navigate through the spaces, the digital space, can they also have that responsibility of knowing that what I'm consuming is not within my folks, and it might have more repercussions. And lastly, back to the parents themselves. I know economic times are, and you will have to beg your indulgence on that.
Team for tough.
The economic times, yes, remain very tough, and they might get even tougher as we go by. But kindly, our good parents, when you are sending these children to school, know that there is that departure from looking for money and looking for your child. Yeah. You might work so hard to get that money, but you lost the child long time ago. Yeah, it's true. To me, you rather lose the money and save the child.
Yeah. Okay, that's very profound. Let's look at a couple of comments and then a bit of questions as well, and then we'll take a break. So this one says, this is a comment, says, parents are often the first to notice subtle changes in behavior, mood, or social interactions, making them a crucial part of early intervention and prevention, which is actually very true. And then says, teachers often serve as trusted adults outside the home and can play a pivotal role in identifying students who may need additional support. So both the parent and the teacher. Then continues to say the phrase, "It takes a village," reminds us that no single parent, teacher, counselor, or psychologist can meet all of a teenager's needs alone, which is absolutely true. And then continues to say, when adults work together with shared understanding, consistent communication, and compassion, young people are far more likely to thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. Then says, I think this is more of a question, what are the most important aspects of teenage brain development that parents and educators should understand when interpreting adolescent behavior? I think, Dr. Njeri, this is more for you. But we also have a question for you, Dr. Asheke. From a parent perspective, it says, as a parent, how do you balance giving your teenager independence while still providing the guidance and supervision they need during this critical stage of brain development? And then the second part is, what approaches have you found most effective in creating open conversations about stress, anxiety, peer pressure, and social media? Yeah.
I think you might need to repeat the questions one at a time. But
yeah. So, do you want to start with the second one? The what approaches have you found?
It's the first one. As
a parent, how do you balance giving your teenager independence while still providing the guidance and supervision they need during this critical stage of brain development?
So, I think the home is the best place for teenagers to start experimenting on independence and even responsibility. So, we need to give them graded responsibilities, slowly by slowly, and seeing how they handle that. You could, for example, think of an allowance. I'll give you 1,000 shillings per month as an allowance, and let's see what you do with that 1,000. And then say, now you'll be in charge of buying your own pencils. So I won't be buying your pencils. Now buy the pencils from that. That's when they realize, there's a difference between the cost of Faber-Castell and Staedtler. Yes. And they are very different. I want to save my money, I buy the Faber-Castell, But they start to earn, so first of all, that gives them some sense of accomplishment, but they're starting to learn some leadership and some accountability behavior. Yeah. And so they need to make the mistakes when they're with us before they go out into the world. Yeah, if you then don't give them any exposure to, say, using money, then this child is now going to university and all of a sudden they have all this money at their hands and they don't know what to do with it. Even worse off if they go out of the country and now they run credit cards and you're, wait, what happened there? So that's one. I think there's another question on...
The second question was on what approaches have you found most effective in creating open conversations about stress, anxiety, peer pressure, and social media?
Yes, one of the things I've found helpful is raising them in a community, within a group of parents who you share values with. And so they have friends, not necessarily siblings, but they are friends who have the same values and they're in an open space to talk. Because if it's just maybe the two of you, you'll get the I'm fine, no answers. Yes, school was okay. But if they're within themselves, they can then, really talk about that issue in a kind of anonymous way. And you're able to get some of the answers out. But I think as parents, we also need to be less judgmental. And so, you start with, I'm here, I love you, and that's not going to change. But I'd really like to know about, what's happening in the space of attraction, and discuss those issues, and in a very non-judgmental way. You're not like stuck in this kill kona msichana nisikuone. Let them just. Sometimes you have to fake the way you're very cool with this information, and inside you're just boiling. Okay. And then, so you're able to get some of that information out. Then go, collect yourself, fix your face, and come back.
That's true.
Yeah.
I see that.
But you try to get talking. And I think also reflecting back on ourselves, we are very quick to chide our children. Then you realize, oops, I think I might have done the same thing, You go back and realize, no, I also have my issues. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. Yeah. So you remember, Yeah, and then you trust God also.
It's true. 'Cause you might
say,
do
okay.
everything right.
Yes,
but
and
then
still,
completely, they turn out different.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so we have a
yeah.
question for you, Dr. Njeri and Otoa as well, but can we answer them after the break so that I don't rush you into, answering the two questions? But keep sending them, on our way, in either on our social media or, on our WhatsApp number. But also when we come back from the break, we'd want to understand, is there hope? Because we've talked about parents, teenagers, the teachers, or this or that. But is there hope, for this generation and even generations to come? And also, Dr. Njeri would also want to understand from you, how then do we support these teenagers at different stages of their lives, so that we don't assume an 11-year-old is the same as a 17-year-old, for example, and when it comes to their needs as well. So there's so much to cover on the other side of the break, so do not stay with us. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Very few minutes left before we say goodbye. Important conversation we're having today as far as understanding the brain development, as far as our teenagers are concerned, but also finding ways that we as parents, as teachers, as the community and the society in general, which we said the village is becoming wider, as we go, how then can we offer them support according to what they need, but also understanding what responsibilities, do these teenagers bear, so that we don't just say, yeah, them, they're perfect, it's us who failed them. No, what responsibilities do they bear as well? And the question that we're asking you today is very simple. When you were young, when you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, or supported? When you were a teenager, what helped you feel safe, seen, or supported? Keep sending in your questions and your feedback as well in regards to the question of the day. But there were two questions. So, Dr. Njeri, this is for you. What are some of the most important aspects of teenage brain development that parents and educators should understand when interpreting adolescent behavior?
Yeah. That's a really good question, and kudos to the person who asked the question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we expect to happen, so we think about things in terms of like their physical development, their social development, and also the emotional development. So when we think about more specifically, like in terms of emotional development, the earlier teens, the ones who are 10 to 13, they might be having some huge swings in terms of their moods. And that is, we expect that because of the hormonal, sort of changes that are happening. However, usually during that time, one of the things we usually tell parents is that, yes, while there are emotional swings, we also look out for patterns. There are patterns that you might see that are persistent and they are interfering with what should be normally happening. So their ability to be able to make friends, their ability to be able to sit and pay attention in class, to follow instructions. So when you see that pattern happening, and one of the places, Mwalimu told us 3/4 of the year they're in school. You get to see that pattern, not just in the home, but also in the school setting. So if you're finding an early adolescent who's having those big swings, but it's even affecting their impulses, their ability to follow rules and regulations, certain odd, behavior, then that is a sign, and that's a flag that we need to do a closer assessment and needs to get a thorough check in terms of what's happening. When we think about them growing and getting older, like in the mid and older age groups, they are, in terms of their interactions, they are moving away from being very family focused, more towards their peers and being able to interact with them. So for me, a red flag is when I find a young person who doesn't have any friends at all. So when you find a young person who has no friends and, talking to the teacher and you find that they're very isolated, then that's a sign too that we need to be able to evaluate what's going on with this young person, because that interaction and those relationships are very developmental in terms of how they're developed, in terms of what they do, in terms of interactions.
Yeah, but isn't that common to see a lot of teenagers just hanging out by themselves, they don't want to interact with others?
Yeah, that isolation. So at home, like they'll want to hang out by themselves in the room. But then in the social settings, you find that they're able to interact with other people their ages. Yeah, their friends, whether it's in the church setting, whether it's in a social gathering. Rarely, like when you find them consistently. Remember, we're looking at patterns, not like a one-off and you're like, oh my gosh, take this child to Dr. Jerry. But if you're seeing a consistent pattern, and then also Mwalimu tells you, hey, by the way, we've really tried to get them out, but we're observing this, please have that looked at. And then when we see a shift in terms of what grades are looking like, because remember, we're talking about building blocks when we are thinking about their education and their cognitive development. But if you're starting to see a slippery slope in terms of grades, and I'm not saying we all aim for A, but if this was a B student, and now we're consistently getting D's and E's, and they're in school, they're participating, but you're noticing a slippery slope in terms of grades, then that's worth looking into in terms of what else could be happening, in terms of their learning, in terms of their adjusting, and even transition when it comes to certain school environments. And the thing I usually tell parents is, please try your best, because parents, we're used to covering our children's shame. Try as best as possible to be as honest as you can be with the school system. If you have a young person who this is now the fourth school, and Mwalimu is my class teacher, the class teacher for my young person, it would be good to have an open discussion and say, hey, the previous 3-4 schools, these have been the challenges. So even as we're coming here, this is where we are at. How can we work together so that this is not the 5th school behind, in our rear view mirror? And so usually I try and encourage, although I do understand there's a lot of stigma around that. But then again, when we think about these patterns that we're looking out for, it's probably the first school noted the pattern, called it out, you moved them to the next one, the second school, when they started to get a hang of it, etc. So patterns are really, really important. Again, we've talked about it, I think today. Young people are pushing boundaries. They're always testing and experimenting. And we need to be able to differentiate that from problematic behavior. If it's happening on a one-off, and then you're able to correct them and redirect them, that's one thing. But if you keep noticing it's the same thing over and over again, or a series of dysfunctional behavior, then that's definitely something we do need to address. And so, being able to bring them into the adolescent medicine clinic, bring them to the pediatrician. And even when you do that, connecting us with their teachers so that we can also be able to get some background information from the school is usually very, very helpful. It's really, really important. So those are some of the things that we look at, how they interact with other people, how they are being able to reason and rationalize in terms of their cognitive development. And of course, their physical growth and development is something that we monitor. Even if they're not unwell, when they come in for their checkups, those are the things we're checking on to make sure that they're on the right track.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a good thing to even just realize that there's the adolescent medicine clinic. Like, it's because we're used to the pediatrics,
Yes.
So it's there's hope, I think.
Yes, there is. Yes, thank
hope.
you for saying that.
All right. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think there, in terms of parents, it's true. We are the last ones to accept that our children have a problem.
I actually had a case.
Yeah.
All the schools have PTCs, parent-teacher conferences.
Yes.
And I observed that most parents are taking a defensive. They come to defend their children, and my urge to all parents is just come with that open mind. And when she talks about handling a teenager who knows that my mom or my dad is coming to jump on my support or to defend me, it's not going to provide a solution. Your question is very spot on. How do we go about we might not completely eradicate it, but just maybe to mitigate the problem so that we have sanity in our schools.
Yeah. Can we answer that after this one?
Oh, okay.
So this is specifically for you from a teacher's standpoint, which says, being a teacher from times immemorial, we're supposed to be calling, but now we see money is at the forefront, and we see children being chased from schools, children being stigmatized and embarrassed before other students or peers because they don't have. Isn't it part of what brings discrimination because of the rules in schools that foster indifference amongst them?
Yeah, it is indeed true. And money could either be school fees or maybe pocket money. Most schools are adopting a more neutral policy they are putting a capping to how much you should give your children, so that we create that uniformity in our schools. So, a school operates on a social status of almost equality. In fact, the very reason why we have school uniforms in schools is because of that Pandora's box that will have been opened if home schools were, or home clothes were to be part and parcel of our school community. So as schools, we've really tried. In fact, you saw last week, was it last week or the other week, when the government was saying that they are really considering on how to make second term a little bit less or shorter. Because we have realized also the more when the term becomes a little bit longer, and second term has a lot of activities infused in it. So we are really trying as teachers to see how do we neutralize second term so that it's not action-packed. But I think as a teacher also, dwelling much more on the cognitive aspect, just teaching this, everybody, every parent wants his or her child to get an A. But for me as a teacher, I've come to realize that working on a holistic person is much more than just concentrating on the grades, because that's what we have seen is the major contributor to this particular problem. So when we are doing a taught curriculum, for us, there are three components. There is taught curriculum. When I'm teaching this set of 30 students in my class, I must now be cognizant of the fact that they're not all endowed with the same cognitive abilities. So I'm speaking to all teachers who are listening to me, that the concept of differentiation now must set in. Because there will be three sets of students. There are those who are high achievers. They're going to just grasp the concept immediately, you explain. There is the average students, and then there's the lower achievers. Most of us are doing a disservice to the lower achievers. We are expecting that they should learn as fast as the high achievers, and ultimately, like my sister says here, that is what contributes to stress. And they are able to now look at defensive mechanism on how to go about it. Number two, can we also look at a curriculum that is also holistic in terms of co-curricular activities? You cannot spend the whole day in the classrooms, in the laboratories. For God's sake, the old adage of no play and work makes Jack and Jill dull people is so true. Most schools are also giving a raw deal to these young people. They are not being exposed out, and it does not really require that schools must have those robust infrastructure, swimming pools, gymnasiums, and all. You can improvise. Let these students have outdoor. Just having even a lesson out of a classroom. Some of us remember our teachers not because they taught us content. It is how creative they were with us. And you are like, that teacher made my life in school much more easy. Better. So let us deal with this. Yes, they are fragile generation. In as much as you guys want us to apply euphemism on them, but you cannot compare their resilience levels with others. So can we look at how can we make them love school? Okay. The other day I was asking them, school or home? Again, 80% home.
Okay.
Homeschooling.
And remember, even before we started the show, we were asking ourselves this. Like, the teenagers now and teenagers then, like, what is it that is so different with this ones? Because I fundamentally think probably the way we were raised and whatnot, because before you thought about saying something, you would ask yourself several questions.
But finally, just to conclude in a second, the assessment is part of our curriculum, assessed curriculum. Why must you wait to put exams bombarded within a short period of time? Why can't we adopt a system where this 100% is spread like all over the year? In the first quarter of the year, they are doing 25%. Then they do the exam out of 50, and then they do the other one at 25%.
Okay.
So that formative and summative assessment to my dear teachers listening to me will also be a solution out of this. Because you are putting terminal exams packed up, and maybe these students, you know how it is when the books you've written, like 4 books notes, you need to cram that in a week.
No. That's
So
that's
if
heavy.
we for 10 subjects.
That's heavy.
So if we are able to pace our assessments, and most schools are actually now becoming, and that's the reason why I admire the CBC. CBC might have its own challenges, but when it comes to assessment, that is where I
It's
give
a big
them a
fair.
tick.
Okay.
They have project-based learning, play-based learning, assessment. There's the orals, things that can make the students feel part and parcel of the teaching and learning process.
I see, because even someone was saying, looking at the patterns, especially with like ASON and whatnot, it's at specific times, closer to the examinations, and you know, and especially when the kids feel, I know, we really can't handle this. We have a question. I think this is for you, but also I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Njeri. So this one says, how should the modern day adolescent be punished as a way of upbringing and instilling discipline? And then the second part to that question is, I think this is a case in point, for this adolescent suspected of arson in schools, how do we strike a balance in preferred punishment given that they are still children? Heavy. I know.
Heavy. Hey,
That's heavy.
That's a lot. It's heavy.
That requires a legal perspective.
Be disciplined right now.
Yeah.
I think maybe we should start with, how should they not be disciplined? I don't think corporal punishment will work for an adolescent in this age. No. It will not work. It will not work. I don't know if Mwalimu agrees with that.
Rod spoil the child.
Yeah, I think at that age, when they're now teenagers, it's a little bit hard to instill corporal punishment, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't discipline them. And discipline can take various forms. You could take away privileges, their sacred phones that they love so much. Yes. You can take away the phone. You can, get them maybe to do some duties in the house, in the shamba, get them to do something, and talking. I think the biggest issue is communication, because the reason you're telling them this is wrong is because you can see a bit further than they can, and you can see that if you continue with this behavior, ahead there is trouble. There shall be trouble. So if you can have that conversation. That's one of the things that you could do. As a way of punishing or disciplining them. The one about, what should be done. I almost don't want to believe that, someone can do that in their right sense of mind, So I don't know. Yeah. Maybe let me just, it's a pass.
Yeah, pass. Yes.
Yeah, but also, Dr. Njeri, to hear from you as well, because there's the balance, because they're still teenagers, they're still children.
Yeah.
But what they committed, the suspected ones, it's unimaginable. Families lost their children based on what they did.
Yeah. Children in conflict with the law is extremely difficult to navigate, because there's the part in terms of like what happens in terms of the legal requirement, and how do you then have a punishment that still protects them as children. So that one, even me, I'm like, washeke, I almost want to pass. And when you think about, and that's why it comes back to those things around patterns, because I think for the adults around a lot of people who've had conflicts with the law, there's somebody who pointed out a pattern. Yeah, like the way Mwalimu was saying, in your right mind, would you set ablaze, and the intentionality around some of the elements around that case. So it's also for us to have the courage to call out patterns that are dysfunctional or patterns that are concerning, whether you're the parent, whether you're the teacher, whether you're the person in the religious organization that has noticed something, to be able to have that courage, because again, this is our child. It can't be relegated to this is only Jerry's child. Like, what is our responsibility, all of us? Being able to think about consequences that make sense for the younger adolescent. They're still more rules focused, but being able to set those rules in place and be consistent with them, because the challenge ends up being, today you punish me for the thing, the next time maybe I caught you at a time when you are stressed or you are distracted and you're not being consistent with it. So in terms of the consequences for actions that are wrong, then it needs to be consistent. What I have found, shouting at people never gets anywhere. I feel like shouting and corporal, same was up. And so usually, again, communicating with them and being very firm and stand with it, however uncomfortable it is, because I think one of the most tiring things for a lot of parents is just being able to stick with it and have those consequences sticking. So also thinking about who are the supports around you who help you stay on course when it comes to some of those consequences. So again, I won't berate the point, but then like Washeke said, taking away certain privileges, being able to give them certain duties that they need to do, that take away from a resource that they have. Like if they had wanted a lot of time to do thing X, now you've redirected it. Is what I would think about in terms of what consequences. I don't even, punishment is not. Like, what are the consequences for this thing that you have done?
Okay. Otto, I'm curious to hear from you, but then I think I'll take that as because we have less than 5 minutes to go. And remember the question on, is there hope? And if hope is there, then what do we do as parents, as teachers, the entire community, even the internet village, do to really support this teenagers as they grow into responsible adults in future? So I think like a minute 30 to all of you, but yes, your comment as well on the punishment.
Punishment is a big word. Behavior control, behavior modification, positive reinforcement works much more better. If these guys know, and I urge all the schools to even review their school rules, during our time, and it's been remained largely up to now. You just read a set of rules without rewards or punishment, or a good rule is the one that will either reward or will punish. So it becomes a deterrent. So if we are just told there is no stealing in this school, if I steal, so what happens out of it? So can we also review our rules so that these children are aware that when I do this, these are the repercussions. But mostly, importantly, these rules should also not be just like a blanket application to all of them. Each and every parent should have a responsibility to know that my child has gotten to this school as an individual. Last week, I was very happy when the DCI, they're in charge of police abstract and certificate of good conduct. They said right now they're going to be tabulating all these infractions from as young as wherever you are. By the time you go to DCI to take your certificate of good conduct and your fingerprints or your prints are all somewhere in a school having been involved, you will not be eligible to get that. So when they also know that we are into this as individuals, but not as a group, they will also be a little bit more responsible. But I think, just like you do say, it is a whole community, it's a whole village to bring these guys up.
I see that. Thank you so much, Otara. Dr. Washeke, on the hope and how do we support them with the understanding? Yes, you're still teenagers, lakini.
I think one word to the teenagers would be, like Mwalimu has said, what you're doing now has sometimes lifelong consequences. Nobody will excuse you because you are a child. So whatever you do now could affect you the rest of your life.
That's true.
As much as your parents want to be there and to support you, there's some consequences they just can't take away from you. So that's to the children.
Yeah.
I think to the parents is to say, let's do the best with whatever information we have when we have it.
Yeah.
Let's not beat ourselves for what we didn't do. Maybe we didn't have that information that time.
True.
Now we know better. Let's do better.
Let's do better.
Our role is not just to provide bread and school fees. It goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
It's to be that comfort, that safe space that child needs.
Yeah.
And also that listening ear to the teacher that, we are not there to just, like put the teacher down.
Yeah.
We're also there to walk alongside the teacher in making the best of this child.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Asheke. Dr. Njeri? Yeah.
There's hope. There must be hope. Because these children, these adolescents are our future. We're not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
There are so many things that as a society that are in place. We have so many different legal structures that are in place that we don't even know the full extent of. So even in terms, when we think about the parents, the teachers, people in the society and our communities, we need to be able to be more knowledgeable about those elements so that we can keep teaching them. We can keep teaching them as we go along. If I knew by there something that I did when I was age 12, 13 is going to have an impact on my certificate of good conduct, even if you might not be able to fully comprehend what is this certificate that you guys are saying, but just understanding that it has a repercussion and it's repeated throughout and it's taught throughout is something that all of us will need to take responsibility for. I think we have hope because we have so many resources and we need for the resources to stop being in the silo of mwalimu, daktari, parent, and we need to bring our resources and bring our strengths together because we have so many tools in our arsenal to be able to help these young people. We just need to start talking to each other. We really do need to communicate with each other. And just understanding that these young people, this energy can be redirected to bigger, greater, more positive things. This is just but a stage. That's terrible English, Paul Mwalimu. But, it's just one of the stages of growth and development, and we just need to just redirect them and rechannel that energy and just set them back in the right direction. So there's hope. For sure, there's hope.
I really like that. And also, a director will kill us, but just understanding the adolescent medicine clinic. Very quickly, where can people find it? How can people reach you? Because I think it's important. I didn't know it existed.
So the Adolescent Medicine Clinic is based at Aga Khan University Hospital. We run a clinic from Monday to Saturday, and this is for all young people from age 10 to 24 years of age. So we have the 10 to 19, that's the teen clinic, and then we have the college health clinic, which is 18 to 24. So if you call our lines, you're able to make an appointment in Dr. Jerry's clinic.
That's really good.
Thank you so much.
I really like that. I'm like, there's hope, clearly. But on the question of the day, in like 1 second, what made you feel safe, seen, supported in 2 seconds?
Talking to my mother.
Talking to your mother.
The voice, the agents. To be heard. At least that's what they also want.
The voice. I like that. And Dr. Asheke?
The home, the stability of the home. That made me feel safe. But the teachers also make you feel you have something to give the world. You have this potential in you.
I see that. I mean, I'd say the same because both of my parents are teachers. So there's that part where we would sit together and study. Much as walikuwa wanatutandika if you say your own things. But there was that. There was that support both academically and also just, on these other aspects of our lives, which I think is important. But that was a good conversation. Thank you so much for coming by today. Dr. Asheke Ng'ang'a, who is a parent. Amekuja leo in the capacity of a parent, but you are pediatric gastroenterologist. We'll have her on the show sometime to talk about that. And also Ochoa Sifuna, not a new face here on Your World, an education expert. Thank you so much for your time. And also Dr. Njeri Karianjahi, who is an adolescent medicine expert. Now you know that specialty exists, okay? My name is Winnie Lubembe. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow on Trendy Thursday. Stay safe. Goodbye.